For the longest time in my recovery, I didn't exercise. I ate sufficiently, a whole lot more than I did during the time of my restriction. I followed my therapist's advice. I ate what my mum plated up for me, and I challenged my fear foods. I was on the right track. I was doing well. But mentally, oh dear. Guess what? That wasn't recovery. I only ate the food that was plated up for me, followed the advice that was presented to me, didn't exercise because that's what I was told to do. Sounds good, but it also meant that I would never eat more than I was expected to eat. I would never take any additional steps when they weren't required of me, and hell no would I ever face any fear foods if they weren't planned in and plated up for me right there and then. I wouldn't have the ice cream just because I fancied it. I wouldn't have an extra slice of bread just because I was still hungry. And once I was allowed to go on small walks, there was no way I was going to miss that small walk. I was going to go. Also, when I knew there was a big challenge coming up, or if I knew I'd be eating out later, you bet I'd be going with the safer alternative earlier on in the day if there was ever an option. And if there was a way I could still restrict just that tiny little bit, I probably would have. But I was gaining weight. I was following the protocol. I was listening to the advice that was given. On the outside, I was doing really quite well. And everyone thought I was doing well. I was eating better, I was gaining weight, I was a happy kid, at least on the surface. And I see this all too often, and I bring it up all the time, and it frustrates me so damn much. But as soon as professionals see the weight going up, or as soon as a healthy BMI is within sight, not even reached, the lowest possible healthy BMI in sight, support starts to drop away. You're assumed to be doing fine. You're regaining your health. What do you need them for anymore? Why do we drive those in recovery to the minimally acceptable BMI and assume that they're fine once they cover up their disordered behaviours with smiles and excuses and the occasional chocolate pie? Maybe. Only to relapse at the slightest inconvenience or source of stress. And why are we surprised when they do? Inevitably. In quasi-recovery, the line between recovered and ill is a fine one. Why would we want to stay in this limbo, trying to balance the two, if we can make it to full recovery? And I'm asking you now, but really, I should have been asking myself that back in the day. I think fear just kept me paralyzed. Fear of the unknown. If I just did what everyone expected of me, I'd get a pat on the back. People would be happy. I would be successful. If I did more than that, well, I feared that no one would notice my extra efforts, and I feared that the eating disorder would grow so loud and shout at me that I was failing with every extra bite that I took. It was a constant war in my head, even if on the outside, it did look like everything was perfectly fine. Anyway, even if I was in this limbo, if I were to acknowledge that or mention that to anyone, I wasn't sure if people would even care, because at least I was struggling with an extra 10 or 20 kilos on my body. At least I wasn't at a critically dangerously low weight. At least I wasn't just going to pass out and outright die. And I think that's always been my mindset. If it's not life or death, I'll keep it to myself. And that's backfired more than once, so if you're struggling, reach out for help. Reach out. Even if you go and DM me right now for a one-to-one discovery coaching session, do something. Don't keep it to yourself, because that's how I stayed stuck in this state of quasi-recovery for too damn long, wasting my months, years and precious time just thinking about food, eating as little as acceptably possible, and just not living life. I guess for too long also, I kept convincing myself that eating disorder symptoms were just something to be managed, and I'd heard other people say it. You can never fully recover from an eating disorder. You'll always have some thoughts or some urges, and the important thing is not to act on them. Now, a few years on, obviously I know that that's BS, because your mind can rewire with practice, to work with a therapist or a coach, challenge those thoughts. And your body can recover from starvation. So gain the weight and regain your healthy body back. Once these two components come together, what restriction is there to recovery? What makes it that you'll always have to manage the eating disorder? There's honestly no evidence for that. And I know from my own experience that full recovery, no eating disorder thoughts whatsoever, is possible. So why shouldn't that be the aim? Why wasn't that my aim? And I can get frustrated and angry looking back at my life, looking back at myself, but there's no point. I was ignorant, very ignorant, and I know that a lot of people are, which is precisely why I'm making this video and sharing my experiences, because there is no excuse now not to keep going. Stop staying in the state of quasi-recovery, damn it, and give life a proper chance. If I'd known back then that full recovery was possible, I think I would have given it a go, but I didn't know, and I didn't seek any disconfirmation of my existing beliefs, so I stayed stuck. I justified my food choices by saying I was just really healthy and always had been. I justified my weight because, yeah, I was skinny, but literally everyone else in my family is. The extortionate amounts of junk food I had to eat in hospital, well, I had them whilst in hospital because I had to. But there was no reason to stick to them after because I genuinely didn't crave them. And to be honest, I don't crave a lot of junk food now, but if I had to be honest with myself back then, I probably did. During my recovery, I had to go through phases of eating a lot of sugar, eating a lot of fat, eating a lot of food in general, because at that time, that is exactly what my body needed. And nowadays, yup, maybe it doesn't need that anymore. Maybe it's asking for different things. But even now, if it wants chocolate, it wants chocolate, and I'm going to give it that. Before, well, that time of the month, if I'm eating a pack a day, so what? And I think the only reason I can do that now is because I did challenge that in the past. And not just in a structured way, but also by listening to my body whenever it asked for it, which I have to admit was extra challenging because it required me to go above and beyond what others expected of me. I had to do it for no one other than myself. I had to view myself in a different way, to acknowledge my own value and acknowledge that, yes, it was okay to do things for myself, for my own health, for my own enjoyment, because I matter. And yes, I'm still healthy and I'm still skinny, and that's not a lie made up by the eating disorder. It's life. It's me. That's what I am. That's what my life is. But it's not an excuse either. If I put in a lot of time and effort, I'm sure I could try to gain some more weight. And for my own physique goals, that's actually what I am trying. Though it is definitely hard. Not because of the eating disorder, but physically, weight gain is not the nicest thing a lot of the time. Anyway, I think that for the longest time, facing my fears every single day in what I obviously assumed were extortionate amounts, and gaining the weight and challenging myself whenever possible, well, That's what saved my life. That's what actually allowed me to leave the eating disorder behind for good. So even if your cravings seem excessive right now, even if you feel super lazy because all you want to do is lie in bed, even if insert other excuse here, do it, because this is temporary. The discomfort is temporary, but you need to push through it to reach a state of recovery, which can be permanent. Push through to full recovery and stop hanging around in that quasi state of misery. It's not worth it. It took a lot of letting go of labels: healthy, naturally skinny, vegan, active, etc., to just accept myself for me, for what I genuinely am, for what I enjoy doing, for what I'm passionate about, for me. Seeing things in black and white, that was a tool of the eating disorder. It was something I had to let go of. And it's something I only discovered by going for it, by letting go of the eating disorder, by eating more, by allowing myself rest, by fighting. A healthy relationship with your body or a healthy relationship with food is already quite disordered in the society that we live in. I had to let go of labels, I had to let go of societal norms, and I had to just focus on what was important to me. And that was recovery. And then, of course, I had to live in line with that and take the steps to get me there, no matter what. I'm not saying there is a perfect or imperfect way toward recovery. And I think most journeys probably look a bit like that. That's fine. As long as the upward trend is there, as long as you keep going, as long as you've got that motivation, I know that you can get there. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying you have to do it alone, but I am saying it's possible. And if someone had told me that back in the day, oh, damn, would I have gone for it much, much earlier. Take care. Keep taking the steps you need to take in your recovery, and I'll see you next week for another video.